The storm's gift. The storm hit Monterey Bay like a living thing, wild and hungry. Celeste Morgan pressed her palms against the reinforced glass of the research station's observation deck, watching waves crash against the rocky coastline with terrifying beauty. The wind howled through the gaps in the cliff face, and rain lashed the windows and sheets, so thick she could barely see the churning ocean below. She should have left hours ago. Dr. Peterson had warned everyone to evacuate before the storm made landfall, but Celeste had been too absorbed in her coral restoration data to notice how quickly the sky had darkened. Now the coastal road was flooded. She was trapped in the isolated marine research facility with nothing but emergency supplies and the growing realization that she'd made a terrible mistake. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Celeste fumbled for her phone, but the signal was dead. She was completely cut off from the outside world. That's when she heard a sound that didn't belong to the storm. The distinctive whop 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 of helicopter rotors growing closer through the chaos. She pressed her face to the glass, trying to see through the rain-soaked darkness. A spotlight cut through the storm, sweeping across the facility's landing pad. The helicopter was in trouble. She could see it struggling against the wind, listing dangerously to one side. The pilot was fighting to maintain control, but the storm was winning. The aircraft touched down hard, skidding across the wet concrete. Before coming to rest at an angle that suggested significant damage, Celeste grabbed her emergency jacket and rushed toward the main entrance. Through the storm, she could see a figure stumbling away from the helicopter, hunched against the wind. Without thinking, she threw open the door and stepped into the maelstrom. The storm hit her like a physical blow. Rain stung her face, and the wind threatened to knock her off balance. "This way," she shouted, though she doubted anyone could hear her over the roar of the elements. She waved her arms, trying to guide the stranger toward the research station. The figure looked up, and even through the rain and darkness, she caught a glimpse of sharp features and dark hair plastered to his skull. He was tall, moving with the kind of controlled grace that suggested he was used to being in command. When he reached the door, she had to put her shoulder against it to force it closed against the wind. They stood in the emergency-lit entryway, both breathing hard. Water pooled at their feet, and Celeste became acutely aware of how her wet clothes clung to her body. The stranger was watching her with intense, eyes gray like storm clouds. She realized there was something in his gaze that made her skin tingle with awareness. "Thank you," he said, his voice deep and slightly rough. "I wasn't sure I was going to make it." "What were you doing flying in weather like this?" She handed him a towel from the emergency supply closet. "Are you injured?" He accepted the towel with a slight smile that transformed his harsh features. "Stubborn mostly. And no, I'm fine. Though I can't say the same for my helicopter." He ran the towel through his dark hair. Celeste found herself watching the movement of his hands with unwanted fascination. "I'm Victor," he said, extending his hand. "Victor Ashworth." The name hit her like a shock. Everyone in the scientific community knew Victor Ashworth Tech, billionaire, gator, and according to the business magazines, one of the most eligible bachelors in the world. She'd seen his picture in journals and news articles, but none of them had captured the magnetic presence that seemed to fill the small space between them. "Celeste Morgan," she managed, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and lingered just a moment longer than necessary. "I'm a marine biologist. This is my research station." "Your research station?" His eyebrows lifted with interest. "Then I'm doubly grateful for the rescue. I was actually heading to the Monterey Bay Research Institute when the storm hit. In this weather, at a meeting that couldn't wait." His expression grew serious. At least I thought it couldn't. "Now I'm wondering if the universe had other plans." The way he said it, looking directly into her eyes, made her pulse quicken. She turned away, ostensibly to check the storm's progress through the window, but really to gather her composure. "Well, you're stuck here until this passes." The road is flooded, and even if it wasn't, driving in this would be suicide. "How long do these storms usually last?" "Could be hours. Could be all night." She glanced back at him, noting how his wet shirt clung to broad shoulders and a lean chest. "I hope you don't have anywhere important to be." Victor's smile was slow and dangerous. "Nowhere more important than here?" The power chose that moment to flicker again, plunging them into deeper shadow. In the dim red light, Victor stepped closer. Celeste caught the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with rain and something uniquely masculine. "Show me around?" he asked softly. "I have a feeling this is going to be a very interesting night." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the research station, something entirely different was beginning to stir. 3 weeks had passed since the storm, and Celeste couldn't stop thinking about Victor Ashworth. Their night together in the research station had been unexpectedly intimate, not physically, but in ways that felt far more dangerous. They'd talked, until dawn, sharing stories about their work, their dreams, and the ocean that fascinated them both. When the storm finally cleared, Victor had kissed her hand before boarding the rescue helicopter. Promising to call, he did more than call. He showed up at her lab the next morning with coffee and an invitation that would change everything. "I want to show you something," he said, standing in her cluttered office with an expression that was both nervous and excited. "But it has to be our secret." Now, as Celeste followed Victor through the sleek corridors of his oceanfront mansion, she wondered what she'd gotten herself into. The house was stunning, all glass and steel perched on the cliff, overlooking the Pacific, but it was clearly just the surface of who Victor Ashworth really was. "Close your eyes," he said, stopping before a set of double doors she hadn't noticed. On her first visit, "Victor, what are you? Trust me." His voice was soft, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper. "Please." She closed her eyes, feeling his hands settle gently on her shoulders as he guided her forward. The sound of the doors opening was followed by a rush of humid air and the distant sound of water. When he told her to look, her breath caught in her throat. They were standing in an enormous underground facility that stretched far beyond what should have been possible. Massive aquarium tanks lined the walls, filled with thriving coral reefs, schools of tropical fish and marine life she'd only dreamed of studying up close. The ceiling was glass, offering a view of the ocean floor above, and the whole space was bathed in the ethereal blue-green light of the underwater world. "My God," she whispered, moving toward the nearest tank. "Victor, this is incredible." "How did you—" "I've been building this for 5 years," he said, following her. "Every species here was rescued from dying reefs around the world, where I test new conservation techniques before implementing them in the wild." She spun to face him, pieces clicking into place. "The anonymous donations to the Marine Conservation Foundation. The funding for my coral restoration project, that was you?" His expression was almost shy, a stark contrast to the confident billionaire the world knew. "I've been following your work for years, Celeste. Your research on coral regeneration is revolutionary. I couldn't let it die from lack of funding. Because I wanted you to succeed on your own merits. And because—" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the vulnerability in his storm-gray eyes. "Because I was afraid you'd think I was trying to buy your attention. Are you?" The question came out breathier than she intended. "No." His hand lifted to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I've wanted your attention since the moment I saw you in that storm. This is just who I am when I'm not wearing a suit and playing corporate games." The revelation should have overwhelmed her, but instead, it felt like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. "Show me everything," she said. For the next hour, Victor led her through his underwater sanctuary. He showed her the breeding programs, the experimental coral gardens, the rehabilitation tanks, where injured sea creatures recovered before being released. His knowledge was extensive, his passion evident in every gesture and explanation. "There's one more thing," he said, stopping before a smaller tank that glowed with bioluminescent algae. "I've been working on something that might interest you." Inside the tank, she could see coral structures that seemed to pulse with their own light. "Is that genetically enhanced coral? More resistant to temperature changes, able to survive in waters that would kill normal coral?" He moved to stand behind her, his chest almost touching her back. "I thought maybe we could test it together, in the wild." She turned in the circle of his arms, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "Victor, this is amazing, but if we're going to work together, there are things we need to discuss. Boundaries, Professional ethics. I know. His hand settled on her waist, thumbs tracing gentle circles through her shirt. But first, I need to know something. Are you feeling what I'm feeling? Because I've been thinking about you every day since the storm, and I can't concentrate on anything else. Her heart hammered against her ribs. I think you know the answer to that. I need to hear you say it. Yes. The word was barely a whisper. Yes, I feel it too. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. Then let's stop pretending this is just professional. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the gentle goodbye in the research station. This was hungry, desperate, full of 3 weeks of suppressed longing. She melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as he pressed her back against the cool glass of the tank. Celeste, he murmured against her lips. Her name sounded like a prayer. The bioluminescent algae pulsed behind them, casting dancing patterns of light across their bodies as they lost themselves in each other. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. Stay tonight, he said. Let me show you what the ocean looks like from here when the moon rises. Looking into his eyes, seeing the hope and vulnerability there, Celeste knew she was already in too deep to turn back. Yes, she whispered, and felt the last of her professional distance dissolve like salt in the sea. The 42nd floor of Ashworth Industries gleamed with the kind of corporate sophistication that made Celeste feel like she'd stepped into another world entirely. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, while polished marble and brushed steel created an atmosphere of power and precision. She tugged at the hem of her navy blazer, suddenly self-conscious about being so far from her element. You look beautiful, Victor murmured, his hand settling possessively on the small of her back as they walked toward the boardroom. And remember, you belong here. Your research is what this meeting is really about. 2 months had passed since that night in his underwater sanctuary, and their relationship had deepened into something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Victor had convinced her to present her coral restoration findings to his board of directors, arguing that Ashworth Industries' resources could accelerate her work exponentially. What he hadn't told her was that his biggest rival would be in the room. Mr. Ashworth, his assistant, intercepted them just outside the boardroom doors. Mr. Blackwood arrived early. He's already inside. Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course he is. Thank you, Rachel. Who's Blackwood? Celeste asked, noting the tension in Victor's shoulders. Someone who likes to think he owns whatever I want. Victor's smile was sharp as a blade. Don't let him get to you. He'll try. The boardroom was a testament to corporate power, a massive glass table surrounded by leather chairs, with screens built into the walls displaying stock prices and market data. Around the table sat a dozen executives in expensive suits. But Celeste's attention was immediately drawn to the man at the far end. Marcus Blackwood was silver-haired and distinguished, with the kind of predatory smile that suggested he'd devoured smaller companies for breakfast. His eyes fixed on her with undisguised interest as Victor made introductions. Dr. Morgan Blackwood said, rising to shake her hand. His grip lingered longer than necessary. I've been following your work with great interest. Fascinating stuff. Thank you, Celeste replied, maintaining eye contact despite the way his gaze traveled over her body. Shall we begin? Victor's voice cut through the pleasantries with barely concealed irritation. Celeste's presentation went smoothly at first. She outlined her research on coral regeneration, potential for large-scale reef restoration, and the environmental impact of successful implementation. The board members asked intelligent questions, and she felt confident in her responses. But then Blackwood spoke. This is all very impressive, Dr. Morgan, but I have to ask, how do we know this isn't just another one of Victor's expensive hobbies? He has a tendency to throw money at projects that interest him personally. His implication hung in the air like poison. Celeste felt heat rise in her cheeks as several board members exchanged glances. My research stands on its own merits, she said evenly. The peer-reviewed publications and independent testing speak for themselves. Of course they do. Blackwood's smile was patronizing. But we're businessmen here, not scientists. We need to understand all the factors influencing this decision. Victor's hand clenched on the table. What exactly are you suggesting, Marcus? I'm suggesting that mixing business with pleasure rarely ends well. Blackwood's eyes flicked between them. Dr. Morgan is certainly lovely, but we need to consider whether personal relationships are clouding professional judgment. The room fell silent. Celeste felt every eye on her, measuring, judging. Reducing her years of education and research to her relationship with Victor, she stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "With quiet authority, I've dedicated my life to marine conservation. I have 2 PhDs, over 50 published papers, and have spent more time underwater than most of you have spent in boardrooms. If you think I'm here because of who I'm sleeping with rather than what I know, then you're not the kind of people I want to work with anyway." She gathered her papers and headed for the door, but Victor's voice stopped her. "Sit down, Marcus." His tone was deadly quiet. In fact, get out. "Victor, you can't. I can and I will." Victor stood, his presence suddenly dominating the room. "Security will escort you out, and Marcus, if you ever speak about Dr. Morgan that way again, you'll find out exactly how unpleasant I can be." 2 security guards appeared as if from nowhere. Flanking Blackwood, the older man's composure cracked slightly. "This isn't over, Victor. The board will hear about this." "The board works for me," Victor replied calmly. "Don't forget that." As Blackwood was escorted out, Victor turned to the remaining board members. "Does anyone else have concerns about Dr. Morgan's qualifications?" The silence stretched until finally the CFO spoke. "The research is sound. I move to approve the project." "Seconded," came from across the table. "All in favor?" Shh. Victor didn't take his eyes off Celeste as hands rose around the table. "Ocean. Carries Dr. Morgan, congratulations. You'll have everything you need." After the meeting, Victor found Celeste on his private balcony, staring out at the ocean in the distance. He approached slowly, like she was a wild animal that might bolt. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I should have warned you about Marcus. He's been trying to undermine me for years." "Is that what I am to you?" she asked without turning around. "It's a way to be undermined?" "Celeste, because he wasn't entirely wrong, was he?" She finally faced him, and Victor saw hurt and uncertainty. In her eyes, "You have been supporting my work for years. You did seek me out. How do I know any of this is real?" Victor stepped closer, his hands hovering near her shoulders. "Because you know me. You've seen me when I'm not performing for boardrooms. And shareholders? You've seen the real me. Have I?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Or have I seen another carefully constructed facade?" Instead of answering with words, Victor kissed her. It was desperate and hungry, full of all the things he couldn't say in corporate speak. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've never let anyone see my underwater lab," he said. "I've never shared my real work with anyone. I've never brought a woman to a board meeting because I've never cared what they thought of someone I was with. You're not my weakness, Celeste. You're my strength." She searched his eyes, looking for deception and finding only truth. "This is complicated. The best things usually are. What happens now?" Victor's smile was slow and dangerous. "Now we show them what we can do together, both in the lab and out of it." As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Victor pulled Celeste closer. Far below, the corporate world continued its relentless pace, but up here, it was just the two of them against the world. "Take me home," she whispered against his lips. "To your real home." "Always," he replied, and meant it. The yacht cut through the crystalline waters of the Mediterranean like a blade through silk. Celeste stood at the bow, salt spray misting her face as she watched dolphins play in the wake. Victor's arms circled her from behind, his chest warm. Against her back as the sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, no phones, no meetings, no corporate sharks, he murmured against her ear. "Just us and the ocean." It had been his idea to escape after the boardroom confrontation with Blackwood. "We need time away from all of it," he'd said. "Time to just be Victor and Celeste, not the billionaire and the scientist." Within hours, they were aboard his private yacht, sailing toward the Greek islands with nothing but endless blue horizon ahead of them. "It's beautiful," she breathed, leaning back into his embrace. I've never seen water this clear. Wait until you see what's underneath. His lips brushed her temple. Tomorrow, we dive the reef systems near Santorini. I want to show you coral. Formations that haven't been touched by pollution or warming. The past 3 days had been like a dream. They'd made love under the stars on the deck, explored hidden coves where ancient civilizations had once thrived, and spent hours talking about everything and nothing. Victor had shed his corporate armor completely, revealing a man who was passionate, playful, and deeply romantic. "Dinner's ready," came the captain's voice over the intercom. They ate on the aft deck by candlelight, the gentle rocking of the yacht creating an intimate cocoon around them. Victor had chosen a vintage wine that paired perfectly with the fresh seafood, and Celeste found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't in months. "Tell me about your family," she said, twirling pasta around her fork. "You never talk about them." Something flickered across Victor's face, so quickly she almost missed. Not much to tell. My parents died when I was 12. Car accident. I was raised by my uncle. I'm sorry. Ow. That must have been difficult. It was a long time ago. He reached across the table to take her hand. "What about you? Any siblings? Sister?" "She lives in Portland with her husband and 2 kids." Celeste studied his face, sensing there was more to the story. "Your uncle, is he still alive?" "No." Victor's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "He died 5 years ago, just before I started building the marine facility." "Were you close?" "Very, he was. He was everything to me after my parents died." Victor's voice carried a weight that made Celeste's heart ache. "He taught me about business, about responsibility, about protecting the things that matter. Sounds like a good man." He was. Victor lifted their joined hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "He would have loved you. He always said I needed someone who could challenge me intellectually." After dinner, they moved to the master suite. The cabin was luxurious but intimate, with a skylight that offered a view of the star-filled night. Victor uncorked a bottle of champagne while Celeste changed into a silk nightgown that barely reached her thighs. "To us," he said, handing her a glass. "To finding each other in the storm." "To taking chances," she replied, touching her glass. To his, they drank slowly, the champagne adding to the intoxicating atmosphere. When Victor set down his glass and pulled her into his arms, the kiss was soft and searching, full of promise. "I love you," he whispered against her lips, and the words sent electricity through her entire body. "Victor, ... She searched his eyes, seeing vulnerability there that took her breath away. "I know it's soon. I know we haven't been together long, but I've never felt like this about anyone." His hands cupped her face tenderly. "You make me want to be better than I am." "You already are," she whispered, and kissed him with all the emotion she'd been holding back. They made love slowly, savoring. Each touch, each kiss, each whispered endearment. Afterward, they lay tangled in the silk sheets, Celeste's head on Victor's chest as he traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly, his voice unusually serious. Celeste lifted her head to look at him. "What is it?" "Tomorrow, when we reach Athens, there's going to be a meeting. Someone I need to see. Business, damn personal." He sat up, suddenly unable to meet her eyes. "Someone from my past. Someone who has information about my uncle's death." Celeste felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. "What kind of information? The kind that could destroy everything I've built?" Victor's jaw tightened. "My uncle didn't die of natural causes, Celeste. He was murdered. And the person responsible is someone I've been hunting for 5 years. My God, Victor, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was trying to protect you from it, but now... ... Finally looked at her and she saw pain and fear in his eyes. "Now I think it's too late. Blackwood's interest in you, in USC, is not just business rivalry. He knows about my uncle. He knows what I've been doing. What have you been doing? Using my resources, my connections, my money to track down the people responsible. The marine conservation work, the research funding, it's all real. But it's also been a way to build a network, to gain access to information." Celeste felt like the deck was shifting beneath her feet. So our relationship is real, has always been real. Victor reached for her, but she pulled away. Celeste, please. Everything I've felt for you, everything we've shared, that's the most honest thing in my life, but you've been lying to me. I've been trying to protect you. From what? Victor's expression grew darker. From the truth about who I really am. From the enemies I've made. From the fact that loving me might get you killed. The yacht rocked gently in the calm sea, but Celeste felt like she was drowning. Everything she thought she knew about Victor, about their relationship, was suddenly in question. I need air, she said, wrapping herself in a robe and heading for the deck. Victor followed her, his expression desperate. Celeste, please. Let me explain everything. She stood at the railing, staring out at the dark water. I don't know if I can trust you anymore. Then trust this. He moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. I love you more than I've ever loved anything, and I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Even if it means lying to me? Even if it means walking away from you. The words hit her like a physical blow. She turned to face him, seeing the anguish in his eyes. Is that what you're planning to do? If I have to? And what if I don't want? You too? Victor's hands cupped her face, his thumbs wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Then help me end this. Help me find the truth. But know that once you do, there's no going back. Looking into his eyes, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with beneath the secrets and shadows, Celeste made her choice. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. But no more lies, no more secrets. If we're going to do this, we do it together. Victor's kiss was fierce and grateful, full of relief and renewed hope. Together, he agreed. Whatever comes next, we face it together. As the yacht sailed through the night toward Athens and whatever truths awaited them there, Celeste held Victor close and wondered if love would be enough to survive what was coming. The ancient ruins of the Temple of Poseidon overlooked the Aegean Sea from their cliff-top perch, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Celeste stood beside Victor on the weathered marble steps, her heart pounding as they waited for the mysterious contact who claimed to have information about his uncle's death. Are you sure about this? She asked, her hand finding his. We could still leave, sail away and forget all of this. Victor's grip tightened. I've been running from this for 5 years. I can't keep living in the shadows, and I won't ask you to live there with me. A figure emerged from behind the temple columns, a woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes. She moved with the careful grace of someone who had spent years looking over her shoulder. Victor, she said, her accent carrying traces of both Greek and British, you look like your uncle. You would be proud of what you've become, Dr. Helena. Vasquez, Victor replied, tension evident in his voice. You said you had proof. I do. Helena glanced at Celeste. But first, introductions. You must be the marine biologist who's captured our Victor's heart. Celeste Morgan, she said, studying the older woman's face. You knew Victor's uncle? I worked with him for 15 years. We were partners in more than just business. Helena's expression grew sad. I loved him, and I've spent the last 5 years gathering evidence to prove who killed him. She pulled out a tablet, swiping through files and photographs. Your uncle discovered that several major corporations were illegally dumping chemicals into protected marine areas. The profits were enormous, and the environmental damage was catastrophic. When he threatened to expose them, they killed him, Victor finished, his voice hollow. The orders came from the top. A consortium of companies led by Blackwood Industries, Celeste said, pieces clicking into place. That's why Marcus has been so interested in our research. He's been trying to find out how much we know. Helena nodded grimly. Marcus Blackwood orchestrated your uncle's death to protect his illegal operations. But we can prove it now. I have financial records, communications, witness testimony. Victor stared out at the darkening sea. All these years I've been building my company, my resources, waiting for this moment. And now that it's here... Afraid, Helena said gently. Afraid of what justice might cost you. I'm afraid of what it might cost her. Victor looked at Celeste with such intensity that her breath caught. If we go public with this, Blackwood will come after everyone I care about. He's already started. Then we end it, Celeste said firmly. Tonight. Both Victor and Helena stared at her. Celeste, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She stepped closer to Victor, her eyes blazing with determination. I understand that the man I love has been carrying this burden alone for 5 years. I understand that a killer is walking free while we're standing here debating. And I understand that sometimes the only way to stop a shark is to meet it head on. Victor cupped her face in his hands. If we do this, there's no going back. Our quiet life, our research, our future, it all changes. Our future was never going to be quiet, she said, covering his hands with hers. We're both too passionate about our work for that. But it can be honest. It can be real. Helena cleared her throat. I hate to interrupt, but we need to move quickly. I've arranged for the evidence to be delivered to multiple news outlets and law enforcement agencies. Simultaneously? But first, there's something else. She pulled up a new file on her tablet. Blackwood doesn't know we have this evidence, but he suspects. He's planning to eliminate the threat tomorrow night at the International Marine Conservation Gala in Monaco. He thinks Victor will be there alone. That's right, Victor said. I'm not putting Celeste in danger. You're not putting me anywhere, Celeste said, her voice carrying the authority she'd used in the boardroom. We're partners, remember? In everything? Victor's smile was proud and pained at the same time. You're magnificent. Do you know that? I'm stubborn, she corrected. There's a difference. Not in my experience. Helena watched their exchange with growing appreciation. Your uncle used to say that the ocean doesn't ask permission to be powerful. It simply is. I think he would approve of your choice, Victor. 3 hours later, they stood on the deck of Victor's yacht as it cut through the moonlit waters toward Monaco. The evidence had been transmitted to authorities across 3 continents, and by morning, Blackwood's empire would begin to crumble. Whatever happens tomorrow, Victor said, pulling Celeste into his arms. I want you to know that loving you has been the most honest thing I've ever done. Then let's make sure we have a lifetime to keep being honest with each other. Their kiss was fierce and desperate, full of all the emotions they couldn't put into words. When they finally broke apart, Celeste could see the lights of Monaco glittering on the horizon, like fallen stars. Are you ready for this? She asked with you. I'm ready for anything. The next evening, the Monaco Marine Conservation Gala was in full swing. Celeste wore a midnight blue gown that made her look like a sea goddess, while Victor was devastating in his black tuxedo. They moved through the crowd of international dignitaries and conservation leaders. Waiting for Blackwood to make his move, he approached them during the cocktail hour, his smile as cold as winter seas. Victor, Dr. Morgan, how lovely to see you both here. I wasn't expecting you to attend together. We do everything together now, Celeste said sweetly. Partners in every sense of the word. How romantic. Blackwood's eyes glittered with malice. I do hope you'll both enjoy the rest of the evening. All of it. As he walked away, Victor's hand found Celeste. He's planning something. Let him plan, she replied. We have a few surprises of our own. The announcement came during dinner. News broke simultaneously across every major network. Blackwood Industries exposed for illegal dumping, conspiracy, and murder. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Across the dining room, Blackwood's face went white as federal agents approached his table. His eyes found Victor's across the crowded room, and for a moment, the mask slipped completely. This isn't over, he mouthed. Yes, it is, Victor replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. It's finally over. 6 months later, Celeste stood in the crystal-clear waters of the Great Barrier Reef, watching as Victor's enhanced coral structures took root in the damaged ecosystem. Their joint research had revolutionized marine conservation, and their love had weathered every storm. The pH levels are perfect, she called out through her diving mask. Your coral is thriving, our coral, Victor corrected, swimming up beside her. Everything we've built together. As they floated together in the underwater paradise they'd helped create, Celeste realized that sometimes the deepest treasures were found not in hidden depths, but in the courage to dive beneath the surface and discover what was real. When they finally surfaced, Victor pulled her close in the warm Pacific waters. Ready to go home? Wherever you are is home, she replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The sun set over the coral reef, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink as two souls who had found each other in a storm sailed toward their future together, ready to face whatever tides might come.